everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at one of the stakes events carded for Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. Race 4 is the Floral Park Stakes for older fillies and mares going 6 furlongs on the outer turf course. And Craig, hopefully we can get this race in on the turf. We haven't had too much luck keeping races on the turf in New York as of late with so much rain in the area. There is some rain predicted on Saturday, but it's supposed to come a little bit later in the day now. We're looking at the forecast from as we're recording this on Thursday. So hopefully this Floral Park can stay on the turf going as race 4. We'll throw up the field for this race. 8 runners signed on for the turf, and it does feel like a race that's a little top heavy among the shorter prices, and there's definitely some filler in this field.
Yeah, I would agree. We got a nice sized field of 10. Don't ever want to complain about that. But I think when you really dig through the PPs, there's probably just maybe 3 or 4 that you might be able to make a very strong case for winning.
Yeah, and those 2 on the outside are main track only entrants who would participate if this race came off the turf, although there is some dirt form in the main body of the field, particularly with the number 2 Scottish Star in the chance that this race does get rained off the turf. Let's take a look at the time form US pace projector for this race, and there is a little bit of speed signed on, Craig, to go with the number 1 Bubble Rock. She's a horse who has been in a series of paceless races, but I think that her connections would be happy to defer in the early stages to a horse like the number 4 Shoshana, who comes in from Pennsylvania and just looks like the kind of horse that needs the front end to be successful.
Yeah, this is one of those times I'm really confident, assuming the 4-horse Shoshana gets out of the gate, that she's going to the front. I have no argument with the pace projector. I think she's went to the front 6 or 7 races in a row without much difficulty. So I assume she'll be there here. And most of those have been at shorter distances.
The number 5, Poppy Flower, is the horse that gets that LP flag, indicating that she has the highest time form US late pace rating in the field. She'll be charging quickest of all in all likelihood at the end of this race. Let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with the number 1 Bubble Rock, and she's just a very logical horse in this race, Craig, off her recent form. She's been unable to really stay with the late kick of Roses for Deborah in a couple of races at Saratoga, but that's really no knock against her, because Roses for Deborah is clearly one of the fastest and maybe the leader of the filly and mare turf sprint division right now. Bubble Rock able to get second last time out in the Smart and Fancy. She finished ahead of her main rival Poppy Flower 2 back in the Caress, and she's a horse that can make her own trip because she's got tactical speed, but she doesn't need the lead.
No, the one knock would be she hasn't won lately, but it just said nobody has been beating Roses for Deborah until she shipped the Parks and ran in a bog. But other than that, I mean, she was unblemished, and Bubble Rock always shows up and runs her race. She's obviously the favorite in here, as you have her pegged, and a serious contender for the win.
Speaking of horses that haven't won in a little while, we'll take a look at the horse drawn right to her outside, the number 2 Scottish Star, and they've been concentrating on turf for her recent races, Craig. She's a horse that does handle the dirt, but we'll take a look at her last race at Saratoga when she finished second to Coffee Maker, a pretty talented Wesley Ward horse, and she runs along nicely for second. This was her first race turning back to 5.5 furlongs after a series of route events. Just feels like she'd have to improve on this effort to take down the 2 favorites.
It does, and that was her first cut back to a sprint in quite some time. So maybe it would sharpen her up a little bit. There wasn't a ton of pace in that race last time. It was a mid-sized field. So I would expect her to run fine in here, and she does get a good post draw.
The number 3, It's a Keeper, is one of the long shots in this race. I didn't pull the replay for her last race, but it's one that you might want to watch because she was basically bottled up in behind horses for much of the stretch drive, really had nowhere to go until the very late stages when the race was basically over. I just don't know if that trip really matters in the context of this race, Craig, because she's just a little bit too slow to be considered a real win candidate, or probably even for the trifecta.
Yeah, the speed figures just don't stack up. As you said, she got loose late last time, but that was a race without a lot of pace. We can see that early fraction coded in blue, and that tends to bunch them up at the wire. And I don't want to give her too many excuses when she doesn't really have any back races that would put her in the winner's circle, and she is a 7-year-old.
The number 4 is Shoshana, and she is the horse that is likely to be on the front end here because she does possess quite a bit of early speed in a race where not too many others seem like they are need the lead types. The question with her, Craig, is twofold. The 6 furlong distance, because she's a horse that really seems to be more of a 5 furlong specialist, at least in her 2 turf races, and also just the quality of field that she's facing because she's been beating up on weaker company in both of her prior turf efforts.
Yeah, I mean, there were much lesser allowance races at Penn National. I mean, she did show speed. If she gets loose, it could always be dangerous. But I would imagine the classier Bubble Rock isn't going to let her get too far away and will be hounding her as they come off the turn.
The number 5 is Poppy Flower. Let's take a look at her last victory in the Grade 3 Intercontinental back from June at Belmont Park, and she's actually running down her main rival, Bubble Rock, on this day. Bubble Rock is the horse that's leading towards the inside, getting a pretty confident ride, but Poppy Flower just comes with her typical late rally. She's pretty reliable to put in this run, and she's able to get there right at the end. The 6 furlongs definitely works for her, Craig. She went 5.5 last time in the Caress and just couldn't really make a dent in a race that featured a very slow pace. You see those blue color coded pace figures for the last race. I think stretching back out to the 6 is going to suit her. And she's also getting back her regular rider, Jose Ortiz.
Yeah, I think you can totally put a line through that last race. It wound up just being more of a workout where she had little to no chance given the pace setup. But I really liked her running the Intercontinental, and that was probably a better race than this. We see Amy C, a California shipper, was in there. She's won a lot of turf races. So I like her in this spot. The pace is a little bit murky, but given Shoshana's in here, I think it's going to be solid, and she will come running late.
The number 6 is Risk Free, who is a maiden in this field, but she's a maiden who likes to pick up some minor awards, Craig. I mean, she's pretty consistent. She typically is running well at the ends of her races. Obviously, it's a big step up in class from a series of maiden special weight races to a listed stakes race on the New York circuit, but she does have some competitive speed figures, at least one of them on the turf for back, and she is a maiden who has earned over $200,000 in her career, so she's no slouch for connections.
Yeah, I wouldn't use her on the win end, but I certainly couldn't blame anybody that tried to throw her in tries and supers because she always seems to show up and run a decent race. She just seems to have that aversion to going into the winner's circle.
Yeah, interesting placement here because maybe she's just kind of the horse that'll lose to anybody and come running along for a minor piece of this. Definitely not a bad horse to have in the barn from an earnings standpoint. The number 7 is Can't Buy Love. Let's take a look at her last race at Monmouth in the Incredible Revenge Stakes, and she's pretty far back at the top of the stretch here. She was saving ground around the far turn, but was pretty far behind the leaders who dominated this race towards the front end, and she makes a good late run to get up into third. Clearly, is finishing best of all at the end of this race. And she is just kind of that horse, Craig, that tends to leave herself with a little too much to do. She's got a big late kick on her, kind of like Poppy Flower, but she has to come from even further back than that rival. And she just, from a speed figure standpoint, is a cup below those 2 favorites.
She is, and I wanted to make a case for her stretching out to the 6 furlongs. But as I scrolled through, it seems like she's just more one of those turf dash kind of closers. She actually ran in this race last year and was up closer to a slow pace. Didn't really offer anything in the stretch, so she's not for me.
Yeah, she actually does have a win at Aqueduct going 6 furlongs with Trevor McCarthy aboard at 31-1 all the way back from 2022 early in that year. But she used tactical speed that we have not seen from her recently that day. Closing out the field on the outside is the number 8, Salvaje. And she's a horse that had shown some talent for Cherie DeVoe earlier in her career back in 2022. She won an allowance race at Keeneland, was off for a long time, did win off the layoff at Fairgrounds this year against a weaker field, wasn't competitive against some tough stakes horses at Churchill. And since then, she's been sold to new connections. She went through the auction ring for $52,000 now with Penn National based connections. And I think just some questions about her getting back to top form, Craig, and also maybe having to improve on her best race to be competitive with this field.
Yeah, and having to do so off what a 5 month layoff now. So yeah, she would have to take another step forward. She's a 5 year old now, and it's hard for me to trust that horses are going to improve when they get to this point in their careers.
Well, Craig, let's throw up our picks for this race, and we pretty much have the same opinion here. We see this one as the 2 favorites, and we're both going to give the preference to Poppy Flower, who's probably getting back to what she does best here.
Yeah, I like that she's getting back to what she does best. I think she's probably going to be double the odds of Bubble Rock, and I would imagine it's probably their chances are about even. So I think she offers a little more value, and I just couldn't really make a strong enough case for any of the others in here to beat both of them.
Yeah, those two favorites are pretty tough to get past from a handicapping standpoint in this Floral Park, and both Greg and I will be going with the number 5 Poppy Flower in race 4 at Belmont at the Big A on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.